it is really condemnable to see that particularly West Africans have come under another round of xenophobic attacks in South Africa.
They said it out loud, not behind closed doors, not in some quiet diplomatic memo, but in direct, unmistakable language. African governments are watching, and they are angry. Because what is happening right now isn't just another protest. It's not just another political talking point. It's something far more dangerous. Foreign nationals, African migrants, being targeted, attacked, chased out of communities. Businesses looted, lives disrupted, and in some cases, lives lost. And now, countries across the continent are responding, including Sierra Leone. Yes, Sierra Leone. Quietly but firmly stepping into a growing diplomatic storm. Because this is no longer just a domestic issue. This is becoming a continental crisis. So the real question is, how did we get here again? And more importantly, what happens next? Before we go deeper, make sure you like this video and subscribe. Because stories like this don't just disappear, they evolve. And you need to stay informed.
See that particularly West Africans have come under another round of xenophobic attacks in South Africa. And this time, Ghanaians have been targeted and other nationals from West Africa. Earlier today, I held a meeting with the chargé of the South African High Commission in Accra. Yesterday, I had a telephone conversation with my counterpart, the Foreign Minister of South Africa. And in all of those engagements, Ghana has strongly condemned the xenophobic attacks our nationals have come under. I acknowledge that our counterparts in South Africa have expressed regret, have assured us that there will be investigations and that they will take steps to nip this really condemnable and regrettable xenophobic attack.
Let's break this down. At the center of this storm is a familiar and uncomfortable reality: xenophobic violence. The targeting of foreign nationals, often fellow Africans, in moments of economic pressure, political instability, or social frustration. It's not new. South Africa, in particular, has faced repeated waves of xenophobic attacks over the years. From 2008 to 2015, and again in 2019, scenes of violence shocked the continent. Migrants, many from Zimbabwe, Nigeria, Mozambique, Somalia, Ethiopia, and yes, Sierra Leone, found themselves blamed for unemployment, crime, and economic hardship. But here's what makes this moment different. This time, the reaction from other African nations is faster, louder, and far less tolerant. Because the silence that once followed these incidents is now being replaced with something else: coordinated diplomatic pressure. And Sierra Leone is part of that shift. Now, to understand why this matters, you have to understand the relationship between African nations. There is an unspoken agreement, a shared expectation, that Africans, regardless of borders, should be able to live, work, and move across the continent with dignity. That idea is rooted in Pan-Africanism, unity, solidarity, shared identity. But every time violence like this happens, that idea cracks. And this time, it's cracking loudly. Let's walk through what actually happened. Reports begin to surface, initially scattered, then rapidly escalating, of attacks on African migrants in certain areas. Shops owned by foreigners are being looted. Individuals are being harassed, threatened, sometimes assaulted. Videos start circulating online. And that's when everything changes. Because in today's world, these incidents don't stay local. They go viral. Within hours, they're seen across the continent. People in Ghana, Nigeria, Kenya, Sierra Leone, they're all watching the same footage. And they're asking the same question: how can this still be happening? Soon after, foreign affairs officials begin issuing statements. Strong ones. Condemnations. Warnings. Calls for protection of their citizens. Sierra Leone, while not producing a viral presidential speech like some other countries, is very much part of this diplomatic wave. Officials make it clear. The safety of Sierra Leonean nationals abroad is non-negotiable. And this is where things begin to escalate. Because when multiple countries start speaking at once, it stops being a complaint and starts becoming pressure. But here's where things get disturbing. Despite the outrage, despite the statements, despite the history, this isn't the first time. And that raises a deeper, more uncomfortable question. Why does this keep happening?
What is really driving these attacks?
Is it purely economic frustration? High unemployment? Competition for jobs and resources? Or is there something deeper, something more structural? Because if it was just about economics, then why are the targets so specific? Why are migrants singled out? Why are their businesses targeted first? And why does it happen in waves? This is the part few people are talking about. There are patterns here. Every major wave of xenophobic violence tends to emerge during moments of internal pressure, economic downturns, political uncertainty, rising public frustration. And in those moments, migrants become easy scapegoats. It's a dangerous cycle. Frustration builds. Leadership struggles to respond effectively. And instead of systemic solutions, the anger is redirected toward those seen as outsiders. But here's the contradiction. Many of these migrants are not just living in these communities, they are contributing to them, running businesses, creating jobs, filling economic gaps. So, if they are part of the system, why are they treated as the problem? That contradiction is at the heart of this crisis. Now, let's go deeper into the timeline. Initial incidents are reported. Small scale, localized. Then escalation. More attacks. More areas affected. Social media amplifies everything. Videos spread rapidly. Public outrage begins, not just locally but internationally. Governments take notice. Statements are issued. Diplomatic channels activate. And then, something critical happens. The narrative shifts. This is no longer seen as isolated violence. It is now being framed as a failure of protection. And that's where governments like Sierra Leone step in more assertively. Because once a government believes its citizens are at risk abroad, it has an obligation to act. And that action can take many forms. Diplomatic engagement, public condemnation, even economic or political consequences if the situation escalates. But what happened next raised serious questions. Are these responses enough? Because we've seen this before. Statements are made. Promises are given. Tensions calm down. And then months or years later, it happens again. So the real issue is not just stopping the violence in the moment. It's preventing the cycle from repeating. And that requires something far more difficult. Structural change. Now, let's talk about impact. Because beyond the headlines, beyond the politics, there are real people caught in this. Small business owners who've lost everything overnight. Families living in fear. Workers who suddenly find themselves unwanted in communities they have lived in for years. And the impact doesn't stop there. There's economic damage too. When foreign-owned businesses are destroyed, supply chains are disrupted, local economies suffer, prices can rise, jobs can be lost. So, ironically, the very communities participating in these attacks may also be hurting themselves economically. Then there's the diplomatic impact. Relationships between African countries are being tested. Trust is being strained. And in a continent that is trying to push for greater integration through initiatives like the African Continental Free Trade Area, this kind of instability sends the wrong message. It suggests that movement across borders is not safe. That opportunity comes with risk, and that unity is fragile. Public reaction has been intense. On social media, anger is widespread. Some are calling for stronger action from governments. Others are demanding accountability. And then there are those defending the attacks, arguing that locals are struggling and that migrants are part of the problem. That divide is dangerous, because it shows how deeply this issue is embedded in society. Media coverage has also played a role. Some outlets are highlighting the humanitarian anger, focusing on victims, displacement, and violence. Others are framing it as a law and order issue. And some are digging deeper, asking the uncomfortable questions about governance, inequality, and leadership. But here's the thing. The more this story spreads, the harder it becomes to contain. Because once international attention locks onto a situation like this, pressure increases. And that brings us to what happens next. There will likely be investigations. There may be arrests. Governments may issue reassurances, deploy security forces, and promise protection. Diplomatic discussions will continue behind closed doors. Countries like Sierra Leone will monitor the situation closely, ensuring their citizens are accounted for and safe. But the real test will be what happens after the headlines fade. Will there be long-term solutions? Will policies change? Will communities address the root causes of these tensions? Or will this simply become another chapter in a repeating story? Because history suggests something uncomfortable. If nothing fundamentally changes, it will happen again. And that's the part that should concern everyone. This is bigger than one country, bigger than one incident. It's about the future of African unity. It's about whether the idea of a connected, cooperative continent can survive real-world pressures. And it's about whether governments are willing to confront the deeper issues driving this cycle. Because until they do, statements and condemnations will only go so far. And the people caught in the middle will continue to pay the price. So now the question comes back to you. Do you think these diplomatic reactions from countries like Sierra Leone and others will actually lead to change? Or is this just another moment of outrage that will fade with time? Let me know what you think.